Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining our session today. My name is Alba Rivas. I am a lead developer advocate at Salesforce, and today I'm here with Kotaro. Kotaro is a developer from Japan. He's a demo engineer in Salesforce. And recently we have been working together on something that we have called LWC Builder. Really what happened is that Kotaro first built LWC Builder as a Lightning Web Components open source application. And I told him, hey Kotaro, why don't we move this to a VS Code extension? And this is what we are going to talk about today, about how we built this VS Code extension and about how you can easily build extensions too. Kotaro, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kotaro Nishino. I'm a demo engineer at Salesforce. I build demos for customers in Japan and South Korea. And I recently built the tool called LWC Builder. And I think it's going to be help you build LWC component easily and reduce your time to configure. And you can focus on logics and views. So please let me explain what it is.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Kotaro. Let me first just speak about our favorite slide, the forward-looking statement, which just means that as Salesforce is a publicly traded company, if you are going to purchase stocks in the stock market, you should make it taking into account the functionality that's generally available. But don't worry, because today we are going to talk just about Lightning Web Component open source, and this is GA. Okay, so the best way to start, I believe, it's to show you the extension. And to show you the extension, what I'm going to do is to go to the repo in which the extension is uploaded. This is developer force slash LWC builder. If you go to the repo, there you are going to find a README with the instructions about how to install the extension. Basically, what you have to do is to download a v6 file from the generated assets folder. So I'm going to navigate to this file, to this folder. Sorry, here I have the file. So what I'm going to do is to download it. Great. So my file has downloaded, is in my Finder window now. And to install that extension in Visual Studio Code, what you have to do is to open the command palette, and if you write v6 in the command palette, you are going to find a command which says extensions install from v6. You can click on there and I can go to my downloads folder where my v6 extension, v6 file is, and just install it. Here I have received a message that the installation has completed. And if I go to VS Code extensions, this is in preferences, and I look for LWC Builder. Okay, why it doesn't appear here? Let me look for it. Okay, here it is. This was probably a problem with caching or reloading VS Code. But here we have the install extension, right? LWC Builder. So now that LWC Builder is installed, what we can do is to create an SFDX project and start using it. So first thing that I'm going to do is to create a new project. I'm going to call this project LWC Builder Demo. And I'm going to create this project in my developer folder. And once you are inside an SFDX project, you are able to open the extension. You can open the extension in two different ways. One of the ways is through the command palette. If you write LWC Builder, you are going to find something like this, and you are going to be able to open the extension. And the other way is from your LWC folder right-clicking on the folder. Okay, there you have the command open LWC Builder. Okay, Kotaro, so now do you want to tell us why did you decide to build LWC Builder?
Yes. The reason why I built LWC Builder is it was late, the end of 2020. I learned some basics of LWC, and I was thinking about what to learn next. And there are two options. One is to learn more about Salesforce platform LWC, and second is learning LWC OSS. So first, I tried to learn LWC for platform, Salesforce platform. So I look at what it can do in the details. So every time I created a new Lightning Web component, I had to look up the document and what targets can be applied and what properties can be applied on in a certain targets, what properties cannot be applied and what can be applied exceptionally. So every time I look up the document, I found something new. It was exciting, but I couldn't remember the name of the targets and property attributes. It was kind of hard to remember, and it's not the essentials of the development. So I copy and paste, I created, but every time I create the meta file, I forgot to add the API decorator in JS file. Uh, the first deployment was always failed because I forgot to add the API property in JS file, even though I added in the configuration file. So that kind of repetitive job was a bit time consuming. So I came up with an idea that why don't I build a tool to generate the configuration file with on UI through the user interface? And why don't I make it with Lightning Web Component open source? It fulfills what I want to learn, everything. So I gave a shot and tried to make a tool. And initially, it was built on Heroku. So when I published, it was kind of enhancing the developer productivity, and users said it's good. And just a couple days after the publish, Alba, you talked to me, let's migrate the tool from Heroku to VS Code. Why did you think it was good to migrate the tool and build it on VS Code?
Yeah, so honestly, I had exactly the same problem every time that I create a Lightning Web component. I have to go to the metadata configuration page in the documentation because I have really bad memory. So I saw your extension and I thought this is great, but I'm sure that we can get more people to use it and we can make the extension, the app more useful if we integrate it in VS Code in the form of a VS Code extension. That's why I proposed Kotaro to create the extension part, right? The app can still run in Heroku. You are going to see that in some minutes that I'm going to talk about the architecture of the app, and I'm going to show you that code, but it can run also in the form of a VS Code extension. So now let me demo how the extension works. So here I am in the LWC Builder extension. And for instance, let's say that I want to create a new component, right? This component is going to be called my YouTube video, for instance, container. Okay, it's going to be a YouTube video container. Then here I'm able to select all the possible configuration options that you have in the documentation for the metadata file. For instance, the API version, I'm going to stick to version 51. I'm going to let the component exposed because I want to expose it to different experiences. I can change the master label and the description, etc. And then I can select the files that I want to generate. For instance, let's say that I want to include an SVG file. That's something that I can do, but I'm going to skip that for now. I can also select the option to create a test file. And as I want to expose my component to different experiences, that's something that I can also configure in the extension, right? So for instance, let's say that I want to expose the component for app pages, right? I can select also the form factors that I want to make available for app pages. Let's say that I only want them for desktop. I can say, okay, but I also want my component to be available for record pages. And this time it's going to work in mobile too. And well, many other options, right? You can create the component, make the component available for flow screens and define the different properties as inputs, outputs, etc. Here we have another section in which you are able to define properties. So let's say that I want to define a property which is the video URL, and I want to make this property available only for app pages. That's something that you can define from here without having to remember the exact syntax of the XML, right? I'm going to make my property required, for instance, and well, all these properties that you can define for your property, right? Great. Remember that I selected my component to be available for record pages. So if you remember, in the metadata configuration file, you can define which record pages exactly do you want the component to be available for, to restrict really its availability, right? So for instance, here I can say that I want my component to be available for contact and account record pages. Something which is very interesting is that here at the bottom, you have the option to preview the component files before they are generated. So for instance, if we take a look at the metadata file, we can see that all the configuration options that we picked are here. Our page is available for lining up pages, and there is a property which is a string called video URL. We are allowing this component to only be part of large app pages. This is desktop applications. And we have the component also available for record pages. We have the component available completely for account and contact record pages. And in this case, both form factors are supported. We can take a look at the other files, for instance, the test files, the CSS file, the JavaScript file. And one interesting thing that Kotaro mentioned is that if you expose a property for a builder, then the API property is going to be created for you in the JavaScript file, and your files are not going to have an error on deploy. Okay, so now I'm happy with the configuration, and once you are happy, you can click on create. This create button is going to create effectively the different files for your component that you can see here on the left hand side, and is going to open the JavaScript file of the component by default so that you can start working with that. Great.
Okay, I'm going to explain how to create a VS Code extension. VS Code extension can be developed in JavaScript. So to develop the extension, you have to install 3 packages: Yo, generator code, and VSCE. Yo is for generating templates. It's utility package, not dependent on VS Code extension. And the second one, generator code, is coming with Yo, and it generates the VS Code extension boilerplate. And the last one, VSCE, is to publish your extension and convert into a VSIX file. That's the output of VS Code extension to upload the VS Code extension marketplace or install locally. So let's install these three. Now I have already installed these three. I'm going to go next. So next, run yo space code. This is going to generate a boilerplate of your extension. So move to your development folder and run this code. So I'm going to run this code. It shows what type of extension do you want to create. Here's a list of the types of extension you can develop: color theme, language support, or code snippets. But this time I'm going to select new extension with TypeScript. So define name. So my extension, the one, and setup ID for my extension, same name, descriptions, yep, and Git repository, source code with Webpack, no. And I'm going to use npm this time. So after running yo code, this is going to generate a boilerplate of VS Code extension. And after that, run npm install is safe. So just wait for some seconds.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot to the Create LWC app wizard that you can use to create Lightning Web Components open source applications, right?
Yeah, that's true. Create LWC app is same approach as this. So it finished installment. So, oh no, we have to move to my extensions one folder. So here, let's open this in VS Code.
Okay, so now you have opened the project for the extension that you have created, right? And you are going
Yes,
to run
right,
npm install to install the dependencies.
true.
Okay, okay.
Okay. So here you are ready to develop VS Code extension. Now let's check two important files. Here, one is VS Code, package.json. It has basic information of this package, but also some configuration of the commands you want to develop. Here, hello world command is set defined here already, here, and here. So I'm going to explain what these are. Let's skip it as of now. Let's see the second important file under source folder. There's an extension.ts. This is the entry point of this code. And here, hello world command is already defined. So let's try running this. So since this is TypeScript project, we have to compile TypeScript into JavaScript before we run this extension. So let's see how to run compile. It says run npm compile. This generates a plain JavaScript file under the out folder here. Now we are ready to open this extension running. So how can I open the development environment? Is press function and F5 together. Oh, it's building. Yes, now it pops up a new VS Code editor. This looks like VS Code editor. Yes, this is, but this is with your extension installed. So I think hello world can be found in command palette. Let's open this up. hello world. Here you can find hello world command. Select and you see at the right bottom hello world from my extension 01.
Great, great. And that is the information message that was defined, that comes defined in the extension by default, right?
Yes.
Great, great.
So
Very, very easy.
yeah, very easy to start development.
Great. So, Kotaro, if you don't mind, we're going to switch to me again, and I'm going to continue explaining the details of the architecture of the extension that we built.
Yes.
Okay, let's go with that. Okay, let's go with that. So here I am in the documentation for VS Code extensions, right? This documentation is great. It's super straightforward to follow. You are going to find a couple of examples ready to be used by you. And well, there are many kinds of extensions that you can create, but when you want to include a UI, a user interface which is built in another language, a user interface which is kind of complex, right? That it's something for which the VS Code API is not enough. This is our case because we want to include an application built with Lightning Web Components open source. There is an option, a kind of extension that you can build called Web View. So Web Views basically let you include a web application in a kind of an iframe. So really what we did was to take the extension that Kotaro built with Lightning Web Components open source and include that extension, that view, into a web view extension in Visual Studio Code. Then there is a method for passing messages between the Lightning Web Components open source application and the VS Code web view. And we're going to take a look at the code of both applications to see how this is implemented. So first of all, what we did, the first thing that we did was to divide the two pieces of code in two different repos. So if you want to take a look at the content that we created, first we have the developer force / LWC Builder, which is the code for the extension itself, right? And then we have developer force / LWC Builder UI, which is the code for the Lightning Web Components application. So basically, what we did was to publish the LWC Builder user interface application on NPM, and via NPM module resolution, install that dependency in our VS Code extension. So this is the code. Let me make the size a bit bigger. This is the code for the LWC Builder extension, the VS Code extension. And as you can see here, we are including the UI as a dependency. Every time that we publish a new version of the UI, we update the dependency version here. And that way our extension is able to download the new code from the UI part. Basically, we reused everything that Kotaro had did for the UI, and I mostly focus on developing the extension. Then, once you have the extension, well, Kotaro mentioned extension.ts is going to be the main entry point for our application, and here is where you define the commands. In our case, we define a command called open LWC Builder, and this command instantiates a new class which is called WebViewInstance. Well, this is optional. This is just a separation of concerns. I could have done the same here in this method, but we decided to create a separate class, right? And in this class, if we take a look at the constructor, we are going to see the way in which we create our web view. We start by creating a web view panel. And then we generate the web view content, the UI that we want to include, the one that comes from the LWC open source application. How do we get this get view content? So very easy. What we do is to just use VS Code API to read the files that we have downloaded via npm resolution in our node modules folder. Super easy. So this is the way in which we include the view, the UI into our extension. If you remember, the only communication flow that we have in the extension is when we create the files. When we click on create, we need to pass a message from the UI to the extension so that we are able to create the files in reality, right, using VS Code API. And that's implemented using message passing. What we do is that we create a message. This message is going to contain a payload, and that payload is going to contain all the configuration that the user has selected and really the final files that needs to be created, right? And we are going to pass that message to the web view, and the web view is going to listen to that message and is going to create the files. So I'm going to show you the code for the UI part. This is the code for the UI. As you can see, this is a Lightning Web Components open source extension, application in which we are using LWC as a dependency, right? Is well, I wouldn't say it's simple, but it's if you have worked with LWC open source in the past, you are going to understand it very easily. It's basically, this is the index.html app in which we scaffold all the components that build the UI, right? And one of the main components is our app.js component. In this component, we retrieve the VS Code API instance if it's there, right? Because this application can run also on Heroku outside of the platform. It doesn't need to run specifically on VS Code. And then when we click on create, when we click that button, we create a message with the contents of the configuration that the user has created. And then we use the VS Code API to post the message, to send the message to the extension. Let's take a look at the extension. So how do we listen to that message? Well, really easy, because in the constructor of my web view instance, what we do is to define a handler that is going to respond to messages, right? In this handler, the implementation is this one here, right? And what we do is that if we receive a message called create button clicked, we create a Lightning Web Components folder with all the files that we have received in the payload. Very easy. Great. So now we are going to talk a bit about the contribution points and commands. Do you want to talk about that, Kotaro?
Yes. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
I was actually surprised by the development speed of yours. I mean, the communication between WebView and the VS Code. Was that first time? Was it your first time to develop VS Code extension? Alba.
Yeah. It was my first time. But as I said, I think the documentation was super helpful. And the examples that exist in VS Code documentation are great. And we also took a look at some of the extensions that are part of the Salesforce extension pack. Because we have, for instance, there SQL Builder. We wanted to do something similar to SQL Builder because we wanted to include aligning with components open source application, and we got some ideas from there. So that also helped us speeding up our process.
Yeah, I agree about the document. It's very easy and we can find examples and specifications and it's well documented. So yeah, when I developed VS Code, it was also very easy to find out what I need. So now I'm going to explain the contribution points and commands. Contribution points and commands are how and when the extension should run or perform. So let's see the package.json in LWC Builder. So in the package.json, there's contribution properties, and under that, there are two properties, commands and menus. What it does is define commands here, says open LWC Builder, and its title is for when I open the command palette, it's the displays this title, open LWC Builder. So once you define here, your command is going to show on the command palette automatically. We also want the command to show in when clicking the LWC file folder. So here, menus property and Explorer context. By the way, Explorer context is here, this part, Explorer. As you can see, it says here. This part is called Explorer. So we defined the same open LWC Builder command and with the same title, but restrict when the resource file name is LWC. So by specifying this when property, you can set commands shown only when the requirement fulfills. So we also don't want this command to show on the other project other than SFDX, like usual web development or native application development project. So here, SFDX project open constant is defined with the SFDX project. So we make use of this constant. So when we include this one, only this command is shown with SFDX project. So same criteria apply to command palette. So now I explained how it's defined in LWC Builder, but there are many other options for contribution points and commands. We talk a little bit about the document, and this is the one. And as you can see, it's a lot, but it's explained with graphics and images and colored document and sample codes. So you will find what you need immediately with this document.
Great. So now I'm going to explain the last bit. I'm going to tell you how to create a V6 package and how to upload it to VS Code Marketplace. We haven't uploaded the extension to the Marketplace yet, but we may do it in a couple of weeks. So the first thing that you have to do for that is to install a command line tool, which is called VSCE. I'm not going to execute this command because I have the command line tool already installed, but this is what you will have to do if it's your first extension. And then super easy because you can just write VSCE package to create a package of the extension file. This is going to compile your files, and it's going to generate I think it's here in this out. Oh no, sorry, it's at, yeah, here. It's at your main directory level. Right there, you are going to find a new v6 file that has been generated by the command, and this is the one that then you can distribute to your users, same as we are doing. The configuration for this file is something that you set up in package.json, the version and so on, if you want to increase the version. And finally, if you want to publish the extension to VS Code Marketplace, you just have to write VSCE publish. I'm not going to run the command because I don't want to do that, but yes, so that you have an idea of what else you need to do to get your extension published on the marketplace. And you will need a user, of course. You will need to be registered in the marketplace with an identity. Great. So lastly, I want to recommend you some resources related to this talk. First of all, we have written a blog post talking about all this. This is the blog post. If you navigate to the developer site, you are going to find a blog post called How to Build a Web View Power VS Code Extension with LWC. And here we explain in a shorter version, of course, more or less everything that we talk about today. And you have there some interesting resources as well. These are the two URLs for the repos of the UI part and the extension part. And finally, here you have a link to the Visual Studio Code API documentation. I want to recommend you the different channels in which you can connect with us. You can connect with us in our developer site. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you like the video, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell to receive notifications. Very important. We publish new videos constantly, and if you click on the bell, you will receive notifications about all the new publications and all the new streaming sessions that we do. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kotaro, for being here with me. Now we are going to stay some time in the chat window to respond questions if you have any. And Kotaro, do you want to say goodbye to the audience?
Yes, thank you for watching this video. I hope you will utilize the tool and reduce your enhance your productivity. Thank you, Alba.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.